Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mike Rishu. I am with Net Diligence. I am the account manager for the eRiskHub, which is a cyber risk platform we'll be looking here at a little bit later in the webinar. I've been with Net Diligence for coming up on 10 years now. Mark?
Hey everybody, Mark Greisiger with Net Diligence. Looking forward to doing our presentation today. And Dan Beck, thank you much for quarterbacking all this.
Hi everyone, Dave Chatfield, also with Net Diligence. A lot of assessment work, a lot of management stuff, and very much looking forward to answering any questions you have today.
All right, Mike, let's just jump right in. So folks, Thank you so much for your afternoon. This presentation is going to be broken into a couple sections. The first section, we Net Diligence, we support about 200 insurance companies who offer some form of cyber risk insurance coverage, including county reinsurance, and that's how we came, to the connection with this group. One of the things we do is, besides run a special portal that Mike Rishu is going to show you all towards the end of this presentation, you have open free access to this portal. But one of the things we do is some research with the industry, and so we connect with all our insurance partners. Many of them are paying out for all kind of cyber-related attacks, ransomware, etc. every day, claims impacting you name the organization. They're being targeted, they're being hit, including public entities, of course. So this is our 10th year of doing this study. This past year, we collected a little bit over 3,000 claims. We trend that data. We actually show how that measures up to the past few years, not just this past year, but we look at a windows of like 5 years along the way. So I'm going to jump right into this and just kind of give you guys a glimpse of some of the highlights. This is a study we just wrapped up at the beginning of June, and you're one of the first teams to be seeing some of these numbers. Mike, next slide. So this is on the left-hand side, you see the little pie chart, SMEs, small, middle-sized entities, very much represent the majority of the entities having these kind of issues on a daily basis. Day to day, in the insurance industry, basically, the range of size of organization is often gauged by revenue. That may not be so applicable to public entities, but SMEs are about the same size we find as a public entity. The average public entity in our study had about 84 million in revenue. And you could see they had about 99% of the claims. If you're a large organization, and that was about 11 billion in revenue, a very different picture. So on the right, in the middle of the screen, SMEs, their average incident cost was about $286,000. Large organization, Fortune 500 type company, about $10.4 million. And that could be for a cyber attack that leads to a breach of customer records. It could be a ransomware attack that locks up your whole network, and now you're facing an extortion demand from some guy in Latvia asking you for $1 million in Bitcoin. That's the number one cause of loss, just so you know, is ransomware. Next slide, Mike. So if we just want to look at ransomware impacting the small, middle-sized organizations, the average all-in incident cost is about $352,000. That includes the Bitcoin or ransom demand, as well as the cost of forensics to actually help that client recover. In the middle, it was just every business sector seemed to be having some issues. You can see we ranked them right there. Public entities, maybe 5, 6 down. Number one, it seems like always in losses is healthcare and professional services type companies. And manufacturing often have the more expensive losses, but public entities in our study came in at about $157,000. Next slide, Mike. Okay, so we wanted to give you guys a preliminary view of the most recent study that's going to be, actually, the final numbers come out in early fall. And this is, my research guys got together for me, Mike, and Dave, and just gave us a glimpse of what's coming in right now. They're collecting from all our insurance partners. The numbers have exponentially gone up this past year. really driven by, again, the ransomware threat and business interruption, to the point where it's more than doubled, as you can see here, $751,000 for an average event. Again, that's impacting the SME marketplace. We often talk to forensic experts, security experts. We have a group of 40 leading security companies who serve as an advisory board for us. And every day they're often paying out multi-million-dollar payments to threat actors just to get a decryption key back to unlock a system. The reason why that happens, my colleague Dave Chatfield will go into some of this, is it's just simply that our backups are not always suitable. Threat actor gets to the backups first, encrypts them, so the main network, you have no choice but to restore from something, but if you don't have backups, you're limited in choice, and they want you to pay the threat actor some kind of demand so you can get the decryption key, and hopefully that unlocks your system. That's even not always perfect, just so you guys know. Many times the decryption key does come through, they make good on that, but it may only work partially to decrypt your data. Sometimes some of the parts of the databases can remain corrupted. So it's always a headache for a lot of policyholders. Next slide, Mike. So top cause of the losses, if we looked at our study impacting specifically the public entities over the last 4 or 5 years, ransomware was leading the pack, 157,000. General hacker coming into the network causing damage, about 83,000. Staff mistakes often happen, and that's about 17,000. And business email compromise, being far more costly than the other events, about $200,000. But just so you know what business email compromise is categorized, it mainly consists of ACH wire fraud, where a threat actor takes over somebody's email account and is masquerading as them instructing another staffer or another colleague to usually pay something they shouldn't be paying. So that's one of, if ransomware's, I know especially this year we hear ransomware's number one, a lot of the carriers are saying business email compromise is a close second now. So next slide. I wanted to get a little bit into ransomware threat, the attack vectors, how these guys pull this off. And some of this data is coming from some of our partners. These are partners who offer data for research purposes, for education, and they're actually inside the eRiskHub portal that Mike Rishu will show you guys soon. But I pulled out a couple snippets. So you can see that in the middle, the left-hand side of the page, remote desktop protocol and email phishing are kind of the leading causes or attack points that the threat actors go after. Remote desktop protocol is simply a Microsoft program that allows your system administrator to assist colleagues in a remote manner, because we're all telecommuting these days, working remotely. And sometimes that protocol is left open and threat actors can take advantage of that, especially if it's not password protected behind a VPN kind of a thing. And email phishing is what it just is. They're sending staffers fake emails, and unfortunately people still click on those kind of things. They're very clever in how they word these things, but it's not always they're stealthily getting around your security defenses. They're often just using social engineering and old-fashioned trickery to kind of get into networks. And then on the right-hand side, this group Codeware is one of the leading vendors paying out the Bitcoin on a policyholder's behalf. So forensic guys will come in, help you figure out who, what, when, where, and how, and then they'll say, okay, we can't restore from backup, your network's still encrypted. You may need to pay this threat actor their demand in order to get the decryption key. Just so you know, a lot of the forensic guys are very successful at reducing the ultimate payment, sometimes 90% reduction from where the threat actor starts. They may ask for $1 million, and oftentimes there's techniques that can get them down to 100,000. Some of those techniques are just stretching out the communication, the more hours and days. They ultimately get frustrated and will just take something. But we have a lot of skilled forensic experts who are also listed in your eRiskHub, and they can guide clients through this process if this unfortunate thing would ever happen. One of the vendors is Coveware. They are simply a Bitcoin payer, and they have great data just to show an organization, hey, here's what we're seeing on average, as an example. We also have Bitcoin data and demands coming in from other forensic experts. From a number of them are contributing data to Net Diligence to go into a ransomware impact tool inside your eRiskHub. And that's, again, Mike will show you guys that. It's pretty simple to use, but as a public entity, give you a good sense of here's what's happening to some of your peers around the country as far as what they're seeing, the types of threats, and how much the losses cost them. Thanks, Mike. Next slide. Same thing. This one is coming from another one of our experts called Digital Mint, or a competitor to Coveware. They simply pay out Bitcoin on the instruction of a policyholder if that is what the need is. And their average payments, slightly differ from Coveware. In their case, in the most recent case, 434,000 was the average Bitcoin payment they were making. And they can show you actually which variants, you see that in kind of the right-hand side, top 4 variants, which variants are most prevalent out there as far as impacting public entities and any kind of organization. And then they even break it down as to what cryptocurrency is being asked for. Bitcoin, obviously, the more prevalent, 96% of the time, but some of the threat actors are asking for a stranger cryptocurrency. One's called Monero. The reason for that is they think it's less traceable. But I can tell you this, we know organizations in the United States who can absolutely trace no matter what kind of cryptocurrency, no matter where it goes, they can absolutely trace it. And sometimes the threat actors just aren't aware of it. The other problem when they ask for Monero, it sometimes takes more days for even a crypto exchange to raise those funds, whereas Bitcoin is more readily accessible. Thanks. We'll go to the next slide, Mike. On the left-hand side, folks, different sectors and how prevalent they were being hit in our study. Again, looking at some 3,000 claims. Professional services would be accounting firms, law firms, those types. Healthcare oftentimes lead the pack in these kind of threats, followed by financial services, manufacturing. Public entity pretty far down that list at 4%. That might be a factor, though, of many of the insurance companies we know and support oftentimes won't even underwrite public entities. There's far more, I think, professional service and healthcare organizations being actually insured. So, and then on the right-hand side, I mentioned some of the leading causes of loss causing the cyber claims, ransomware, leading the pack for the last couple of years, followed by hacker and then business email compromise, which essentially is ACH wire fraud. You see at the very bottom of that list, lost stolen device at 2%, that's lost stolen laptop. I can tell you this, like we were looking at our study 4 or 5 years ago, that was the leading cause of loss 4 or 5 years ago. And there's just been such remarkable, see a change across America as far as laptops having better whole disk encryption in place on that laptop, organizations having better policies in place saying if we're putting customer data on this laptop, it's not allowed to go out into the field. So there's a combination of things that basically brought that exposure way down as far as in the eyes of the cyber insurance industry. Thank you, Mike. Next slide.
Yep, that brings us to the next part.
And I'm going to pass the baton, everybody, to my colleague, Dave Chatfield, who is our Uber cybersecurity assessor. Dave has been with Net Diligence for 20 years. He's a lawyer. We don't hold that against him. And he's also an IBM guy. So with that, I'll let Dave take over here. I actually have another meeting I'm going to jump off to, Mike. You guys are aware of that. So I want to thank Dan back, and David and Mike will take it from here. Thank you all.
Got it. Thank you, Mark. So what we'll do on the next handful of slides is go through some mitigation techniques and strategies, capabilities that you may want to undertake to help reduce the size of your risk footprint and frankly, make yourself more invisible compared to the rest of the world. The handful of items here, we'll go through one slide each. So Mike, if you want to go ahead, next one. The first general area is establishing accountability for cybersecurity. And it's sort of a maxim that oftentimes nothing gets done unless somebody is held responsible for doing it. So it's important to, first of all, designate someone within your organization. It may be your IT leader, it may be someone who's technical, it may be someone who's financial, it may be someone who's on the risk side of things, to head up the effort to reduce your footprint of cyber risk across many of the ways in which it can be done. That person or the team involved would be responsible for developing and enforcing security policies. We see in lots of our assessments that we do that there's sort of an understood regimen of things to be done, but very little of it gets to paper, very little of it gets transmitted from longer term employees to new arrivals and so forth. And so policies need to be written, not just for the benefit of all employees having a consistent message, but oftentimes there are regulatory requirements and such that these documents exist and that they be kept updated. Conducting risk assessments, that is a case where periodically, say annually, biannually, you have a third party such as us or somebody else come in and take a look around, ask questions, get an understanding for what the organization's capabilities are across many of the cyber technology and process functions, and arrive at known gaps, suggestions for improvement, and so forth. Establishing important incident response, business continuity, and disaster recovery plans. These are sort of the core of process and technology-centric step-by-step directions that need to take place, especially in the case where this documentation might have to be followed by somebody other than the primary folks who are responsible. If an incident happens and for whatever reason the relevant folks are not close at hand, the documentation needs to be updated and ready to go so that the folks who are on standby can basically pick up the baton and run with it without waiting for a dangerous period of time for things that may continue to happen in the meantime. Overseeing security operations. Now, in larger organizations, that responsibility will tend to be undertaken by an in-house information security team or a department within the greater IT team. But many smaller organizations and many public entities simply may not have the resources to maintain an in-house team to take day-to-day 24/7 responsibility for a lot of those tasks. So there are vendor solutions available who can assist. A virtual chief information security officer, known as a vCISO, can approach things from the policy and directive approach to things. A managed security services provider can be the 24/7 entity who keeps an eye on your firewalls, keeps an eye on the intrusion detection, security information, and event management capabilities, all of those things that are running literally 24 hours a day, but they need to be able to get in touch with folks upon certain triggers that occur, and a managed security services provider can be that resource that can step in on a moment's notice, be it at 3:24 a.m. in the morning on a Sunday or whenever it might be, to get a quick handle on what's happening, mitigate an event to the extent that it is possible, and then to certainly get other folks into the conversation as soon as the the first pass of remediation has taken place. And then the third one we have here, managed detection and response. This is a case where you have sensors and device management all throughout the enterprise being watched carefully by folks who are looking for individual compromise attempts, be it on somebody's workstation, on a server, on a network device, whatever it might be. Okay, Mike, next one, please. Particularly multi-factor authentication, which is the idea that you have to provide not just a password, but also some other secondary authentication feature. There's an old phrase that says something you know and something you have. The something you know might be a password. The something you have may be a token. It may be a PIN sent to your smartphone. It may be a smart authentication application that will generate a PIN number. All of those are workable options for that second factor of authentication. It is certainly really important that folks who are in roles of elevated privilege, system administrators, network administrators, folks who oversee important applications where lots of customer and personal information may reside, those folks really need to have MFA enabled for their administrative privilege access into those types of systems. But it's important that MFA be utilized when and wherever possible. Another example is folks coming in from remote. Mark had mentioned earlier the presence of a remote data protocol, RDP, Microsoft's RDP, which basically allows somebody to come in from the outside and get to their own on-premise workstation or an external third-party support vendor who can come in and do that kind of important work. Those types of capabilities are especially susceptible to ransomware exploits. So it's important that those types of capabilities be additionally protected, not just by the password that gets you into the RDP server itself, but multi-factor authentication, VPNs, other types of capabilities that encapsulate the session where you're trying to go into that workstation environment, so that the risk of being looked at and taken over by bad actors is substantially reduced. There is a preference. We're talking 2022 era. There is a preference for applications that provide authentication rather than just smartphone pins being sent. But whichever ones you choose, it is certainly far better than nothing, particularly for email and high sensitivity applications. Mike, next one, please. There we go. Backups, another risk that is relevant to the ransomware area as well as other risks, is the fact that your backups need to be more than just there and available. They need to be protected. They need to be multi-generational. They need to be multi-site. They need to be in a position where there are, to the extent possible, offline entities, such that if ransomware comes in and attacks everything else, a single off-network repository can be brought back in and restored, failing all other options. Those are all really important additions to a backup architecture, if you will. And to the extent that your backups are relatively straightforward, you may well want to make use of the services of backup providers or backup consultants to help you better design an overall architectural approach to things, so that ransomware can be, to the best extent possible, eliminated as a source of long-term grief, as opposed to ransomware just attacking the on-network copies. Having good, clean copies that are offline and archived are the most valuable resource in recovering from a ransomware type attack. Immutable backups, that's a case where backups are created that are, in the old term of parlance, read-only, that once they are created, they are hard copies, they can't be modified, they can't be changed, and as such, they can serve as really, really good restoration points. So that's a good capability to add. Configuring backups so that logs relating to the completion of backup tasks and such can be funneled into a central event management system so that they can be looked at for trends and completion and success messaging. That's fairly important. I spoke about the air-gapped options and testing. It is important. It's effort intensive to do a full-blown disaster recovery test, but it's also extremely valuable. I can't tell you how many assessment cases I still do, even today in 2022, where I get to the point where we're chatting about disaster recovery and backup, and I'll ask the question about, have you tested your recovery systems lately? And of course, I'm trying to hint at that from the perspective of an enterprise-wide type approach to it, or server wide approach to it. And the response I may get is, yeah, we 2 months ago we recovered so-and-so's file directory because they had lost that file and we got it back for them. Well, that's single file and single file folder recovery, and that's wonderful and it's expected, but it's not nearly enough to protect your environment against more broad-based enterprise-wide recovery risks. So periodic test restores according to an appropriate disaster recovery script is something that definitely should be part of your regimen, and be it on an annual basis or some other periodic basis that is relevant to your organization. That is an incredibly helpful process to have on hand. It also gives your folks the benefit of a mind muscle, if you will, having the ability to know on very short notice how things need to proceed in the event of an actual restoration need. So these are all relatively important tasks here. Mike, next one, please. Implementing email and endpoint protection. These are capabilities that are important to, first of all, of course, email, Exchange servers, Microsoft 365, whatever else you may have in your organization for email, but also for the protection of individual workstations, individual servers, it can even get down to smartphones, iPads, and whatever else you have. There are capabilities in many cases provided by a managed services provider who can, again, on a 24/7 basis, ensure that all of your endpoints are protected and responding to threats that may occur against any element in your environment. These are capabilities that typically third-party vendors provide. Certainly in terms of the email environment, Microsoft provides an extraordinary wealth of protective features within their platforms. If you have a Microsoft 365 E3 or an E5 license environment, you have access to many of those, next generation, current, contemporary security features, and certainly to the extent that they are available, you should make use of them and or have your third-party IT services management vendor make use of those on your behalf. Okay, next one, please. And then preparing to respond to an incident. As we briefly mentioned earlier on, having an actionable incident response plan and program, my goodness, we still see to this day efforts that are, and I'm using the word charitably, informal at best. Entities are not accustomed to having an incident beyond somebody's workstation hard drive crashing on them. That's the least of an organization's worries is an individual workstation going down. The ability to respond to something that is more enterprise-wide, be it a ransomware attack or a hacker who's been crawling into your system or any of that kind of stuff, there needs to be a logical, disciplined, documented, and periodically practiced approach to it. The roles and responsibilities for a team, you will have stakeholders with different disciplines. It's not just IT technical folks. It's legal, human resources, communications, investor relations, physical security, and certainly the C-suite folks need to be involved beyond just saying, you guys work it out, let us know when you got it fixed. No, that we don't live in that world anymore. The C-suite folks have to be active participants in an incident response team program. There are lots of other folks outside of the organization who can, and in many cases, should be coming into the environment to assist with your investigation and remediation efforts. The first call typically will be to your cyber insurance carrier, because they will often have a full panel of resources available, typically led by a legal cyber breach coach who can basically do the initial triage of whether an incident is of a type that will require either just a technical recovery. So, if it really is a system outage or something that is more basic than that, the breach coach will be able to get a sense for that fairly quickly, get you to the appropriate data forensics investigators, recovery teams, and so forth, and engage with those vendors to get you back up and rolling to assist your IT teams in doing so. If, on the other hand, there are indicators in that first conversation that there is sensitive data that may be at risk, that may have been taken, and may in fact be on its way to being publicized onto the internet, that's when you have the entire legal and regulatory framework that kicks in, where you have to begin responding to a privacy data breach event, at which point in time you have a lot of these other legal and reputational and mitigation vendors who may need to come in to assist with those requirements that respond to state and federal level regulations about how to notify your customers and other folks to ensure that they are made whole in case of a broad-based personal information exposure. Talk about alert and notification procedures. Again, this is a lot of stuff that that needs to be documented beforehand, so that when the incident does come along, there are well-defined, easily followed steps that can give your team the advantage in addressing them. There are playbooks. We've gotten to the point in the incident response industry, if you will, that individual playbooks that look at individual types of scenarios like ransomware or business email compromise, system outages, things of that nature. Each type of failure has its own sort of semi-unique set of steps and functions that need to be looked at and followed to provide for a cost-effective and efficient recovery from that particular type of incident. So playbooks exist and/or should exist that touch upon the more likely types of incidents that your organization might face in any given situation. And then finally, as sort of repeating the message that we have for disaster recovery, it's important to exercise an incident response plan with what are often known as tabletop exercises or simulations, and involving Again, not just the technical folks, but the folks who occupy the other stakeholder roles, including C-suite participants, so that each person in the process has a good understanding of what their job is, how it synchronizes with the rest of the tasks that need to take place, and helping the organization have the best overall chance to recover in the shortest period of time and with the least amount of permanent inflicted damage or costs. These are all very relevant to responding to a cyber incident type capability. And Mike, I believe that's the full panel there. We'll figure out what the next slide was.
Helps. Yeah, that's the end of the slides there. So
Okay.
I'll go ahead and take over from here. All right, everyone. So I am going to talk to you all about the ACC eRiskHub, which you all have free access to. Helps if I don't have a timed out thing real quick. Anyways, so the eRiskHub contains a lot of educational, proactive cyber risk resources for you to access. I'm going to walk you through a lot of that content now. But before we jump in there, I want to talk about how you actually access the hub. Just a note, we will send these registration instructions as part of follow-up, but just so that you're aware, you'll be coming here to eRiskHub.com/ACCG. And if it's your first time registering, you'll need to complete this new user registration form. And the important thing here is the access code, which will be included in the registration instructions, but you do need the access code to be able to complete this registration form. From there, you just fill out the rest of the form, picking your own username and password. And from there, you'll be able to immediately log in. So let's go ahead and dive into the hub. So you'll see here, you land here on the home page. We're highlighting a few different sections of the hub, but what we want to look at today is these left menu items. First one we'll take a quick look at here is our news center, and what we're trying to do here is provide you with a nice kind of just one-stop shop to come in here and see what's going on in the world of cyber. To that end, you're able to come in, browse a variety of different headlines that all link back to their original source, so you can just kind of browse headlines or click through to read. We also have threat intelligence from a couple organizations called Cura and Unit 42. And what these guys do is they actually go out there on the dark web where these hackers are hanging out and get into their different, forums and places that they're talking about what they're doing out there. They're actually able to get this intelligence and provide it to us in a feed directly into the hub, so you can actually see what's going on out there. Down below, you see we have a few other additional news feeds as well for you to browse. And then on the bottom, we have our blog section. We have about 20 so different blogs on file that we're just pulling in the most recent posts from. But I do like to point out the first one is the Net Diligence blog. And what this is we do things a little bit differently. Rather than us write on our thoughts on what's going on out there in the world of cyber, we interview different subject matter experts. Some are videos, some are just text, but we ask that they respond generally in a lay-friendly person way. So you don't have to be a cybersecurity expert to come in these and read these and take something away from them. The next section we'll take a look at is the Learning Center. Net Diligence, we are partnered with many vendors out there in the space. And through those relationships, we're able to regularly add different content to our Learning Center, different PDFs and white papers and such. If you're looking for something specific, we'd break it down by category down at the top. We also have our features section, as well as recent. You'll see we'll be posting a lot of alerts here. The FBI, different joint task force, CISA, these different governmental agencies regularly produce these alerts, and they provide them to us to allow you to see them here in the hub. And down at the bottom, you recall Mark was talking a lot about our cyber claim study. We actually have that full study in here for you to view. So you can see that we have the 2021 study here. In addition to our yearly studies, in between the big releases, we'll do these different spotlight reports. And so far for this year, we've done one on public entities that you're able to come in here to view, and one on ransomware. So both of them very geared towards everyone here, so definitely worth checking out. Moving on, we'll take a look at the Risk Manager Tools section. Here we have a variety of different interactive tools that you're able to come in and use. I want to highlight a handful of them. First one we'll take a look at here is our data breach cost calculator. And what this is, it allows you to run scenarios to see how much a data breach could potentially cost. To that end, you just got to enter in how many records you want to say were exposed in this event. Then you fill out a few other different pieces of questions here, but I'm just going to leave them at their default. Come over here and hit calculate. Now when I scroll down, you see it spits out a whole bunch of lines and numbers at us. But down the bottom right, you can see what the total cost for the scenario is, as well as the per record cost. The rest of this is just the line items on how we got there. If you're curious of any of our assessments and how our assumptions, you're able to come over here to these little question marks on the left and just mouse over them. You'll see what our math is. And from there, you're also able to print a PDF if you were had any reason you wanted to bring this to your other people in your organization and show them, give them a better idea also of how much these things can cost. You're able to quickly download that. So that's our data breach cost calculator. I'm going to come again back over to our main tools page here, and we'll look at the ransomware impact tool. This is one of our newer tools that allows you to look at a business sector to see how ransomware is affecting it. This is based off of data that we're collecting from a handful of our partners, companies called Ancura, Arete, Digital Mint, and Unit 42. These are all incident response guys who are dealing with ransomware all the time and have collected a lot of data on that. So I can come over here, drop down, go look at public entities, for instance. We can see what the average ransomware and medium ransomware is paid based on this data, as well as we can see actually in this public entities, we're seeing 61% are actually able to restore from backup. So they do have viable backups to use. And you actually get a little bit more if you want to get into the actual types of ransomware being used. You can get some details on that as well. So you can see here in the public entity space, there's one called PitPaymer that's being seen a lot. You can actually click into that and see how else it's affecting the rest of the world. So you can see also it hits retail and manufacturing, for instance, quite a bit. Coming back over here to the risk manager tools again, scrolling down. We'll look at our claims scenario tools next. So the yearly claim study that we've been talking about throughout this presentation, we actually take all those different claims and put them into a database here for you to use for research purposes. So many years of claim study data is in here. Coming down here, you just select revenue size. We'll look at small business sector. We'll look at public entities. I'm going to hit show results here. And we can see some high-level data, the average incident cost in these claims, as well as the top causes. Ransomware and hacker being big ones there, but also business email compromise. We can see for this specific filter again of small business public entities, we have 60 records on here that you're able to come in and look through. You can see here at a high level the year, the cause of loss, the type of data, and total cost. But if you want to actually dive in a little bit more, you can click on these scenario IDs here. You actually see the breakdown of these costs. So you can see the forensics being 106,000, breach coach, the lawyers who handle this, as well as the actual ransom paid. So, from there, again, back over to tools. Take a look at one more tool just real quick here. We have our mock breach exercise. So what this is it's a one-player game that you can come in and play through. It takes about an hour, hour and a half. And what it does is it puts you on the C-suite of an organization actively going through a ransomware event. This lets you see some of the decisions that you got to make along the way, as well as just how the thing unfolds in general. So you have access to that as well. It's kind of a one-person tabletop. But again, back over to tools. We'll go through all of them. I will quickly point out we also have a library of sample policies. These are all templated policies that have been written by top law firms. You can come in and download for free. So if there's anything that you need to shore up, you can come in and see what we got and download that and implement it right away. Moving on from the tools, we'll take a quick look at the security training page. Again, through Net Diligence's relationships with different vendors out there in the space, we're able to pull in some training videos from a few different companies you might have heard of, such as Ningio, KnowBe4, and Symantec. All these videos are free for you to come in and look through. And then over here on the top right of the page, I also want to point out real quick, we have our fish fight page. So this is a page dedicated to phishing that gives you an overview of what phishing is, some examples of types of phishing. We have a social engineering red flags checklist here that you're able to look through, as well as sample phishing emails. And down the bottom, a few vendors who can help you with phishing training should your organization need it. If you want to reach out, these are the companies that will do things like send everyone in your organization fake phishing email, see who clicks it, and that way you can do like more targeted training on those individuals, that sort of thing. Last page we'll look at here real quick is our ransomware resources page. So today we've heard a lot about things like such as multi-factor authentication, VPNs, RDP, backups, etc. What we did was Mark went and interviewed some of the folks over at a company called Kroll and talked about these different hot topics, these different important safeguards you want to look into having in place. If you're able to come in here, watch these full interviews, they range from about 15 to 25 minutes a piece. If you don't have time to watch through an entire video, we do offer a key takeaways section here that also has a downloadable PDF that you can bring internally to your organization to pass around on that information too. Bouncing back over here to this main ransomware page again. In addition to all these training videos, we also have this Get Help section here. If any of the if you need assistance set up, these things, multi-factor authentication, etc. These are all companies that offer those as services. So you're able to reach out to them. So really that kind of covers the hub. Is there any questions about the hub or any questions for Dave that we might answer? Again, we will send registration instructions to the hub out as part of follow-up, so you will be able to get in there and poke around yourself. If you have any questions when you're in the hub, we do have contact us up here. Feel free to use us. They'll come to myself and my team, and we'll get back to you. Yeah.
Well, thank you, gentlemen. Great job. I really appreciate your time. No questions. Anybody have all the questions have been answered. If you have anything you'd like to ask or say, well, either you've answered all your questions, Mike and Dave, or we have put everyone to sleep. Either way, it's good, and we are going to move on. So as Mike said, I will be sending out the recording, the PowerPoint presentation, and some material that Mike's going to send me. But I do have a question, so let's see if we can get Lucas to say. Lucas,
there we go. Yes, I had a question about there was if we have an incident, we need to report to, like, it was just a couple slides back to reporting to GRMA. Where do we go to do that? I need to get a list of contact information as far as that goes on when an incident occurs.
I will send out within my email contact information to report cyber-related incidents both to GRMA and to IRMA. So
okay, great.
I will send those out with the information.
All right, that sounds great. Thank you.
No, thank you. Great question. Will you please send out the activation code? So I will be sending that out also, correct, Michael?
Yep, I'll send a PDF that has all the link and the registration instructions with access code.
Anything else? All good questions. Again, thank you both.
And of course, the invite is open-ended. If questions come up in the course of time, we're happy to take a shot at them anytime.
We'll do that. We'll do that. So thank you both. You guys have a great rest of the day, and we will talk later.
I'm going to go ahead and send out the access code real quick to all, just if anyone really wants to dive in there right now. That code is out there.
Okay.
Yeah. All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much. Hope you have a good one.
Bye, y'all.